So wave number one, the great reignition. While everyone is talking about the great resignation, which is what people are leaving, which are jobs which are not meaningful, they're actually moving away from what they're leaving. And what's more important is what they're moving towards. You have this thing here, which is this big curve that's happening, which are people starting up their own companies. Think about us moving now towards an entirely new world, just like when Europe first actually discovered America and then started creating a whole new world in America. We're doing exactly the same thing right now with this next stage of our entire economy. Pandemic fuels global growth of entrepreneurship and startup frenzy. So this is actually straight from Forbes magazine. There's a McKinsey's report here. There's a report from the Financial Times, record-breaking numbers of people starting new companies. We don't see a resignation happening at all. In fact, we see record growth happening. So if you find that you're at the moment having a tough time finding the right people, this is not because those people aren't doing something. So be asking yourself, am I reigniting people or am I giving people a reason to resign? And if you actually start deciding which side of the fence you're going to be on, that should be already your first decision in terms of where you're going. Millions become millionaires during the COVID pandemic. I mean, I actually did not expect this to come, right? So for all of my ability to share what I think is going to happen, I actually thought as soon as we actually were closing down economies that we were going to see a crash. What I didn't expect was that governments would be printing so much money and being so irresponsible that that money would have to flow to someone, and it flowed to those who actually knew what to do with that money. So as you can see here, 5 million people became millionaires around the world. 5 million. I mean, think about that. If you've got 5 million, that means that every single day, there's over 15,000 people becoming millionaires. Every day, 15,000. Like that's nuts. It's like almost 1,000 per waking hour. And you can see just how much the growth is going to continue, right? This is not something which is slowing down because there is an entirely new economy which allows you to ride that wave. And if you're still stuck trying to figure out what you should be doing to make your millions, now's the time to actually just be following those who are actually doing it. And I'm going to show you each of these waves. There are many, many, many people who are surfing as we go as well. The number of millionaires continues to increase. This actually gives you the full reporting, country by country, exactly how this is working. And the fact that we're getting this wealth gap, which continues to grow bigger and bigger, unfortunately. But I believe that we're going to see it closing as well. And you're going to see exactly why. Because a lot of the people making the money are actually then helping others in a way that was not possible before by using some of the different ways coming, which includes cryptocurrencies, which includes the metaverse. So if you don't want to just create income, you want to create impact, we're going to show you exactly how that works right now. And it is a different language. It's a different way to be thinking about the world right now as well. This is something we were predicting several years ago, and it's now happening at speed. Every one of the other ways I'm going to share with you are all linked to this whole concept of Society 5.0. So any of you who've been around in our community, we've been talking about this. For those of you who are new, you're going to get up to speed on this very quickly. And it's very important that you do, because this requires a change in mindset and frankly, a change in how we operate with each other. I was explaining this several years ago that the Japanese had come up with this whole concept called Society 5.0, where they said that every time there was a change in technology, it was followed by a change in human behavior. So for example, when we had the technology to have hunting tools thousands of years ago, it changed our behavior from all working on our own to then being nomadic tribes. And the number one way that we operated as a community was in these tribes. And we were nomadic. We would travel around to wherever the animals were because the animals were traveling around. And then what happened more like about 1,500 years ago was we started realizing that we could have the tools not to go hunting as much as tools to be farming. And that's when we said, hey, maybe we shouldn't be traveling around in nomadic tribes. Maybe we should be just hanging out together in villages. And those villages should be where the farms are. We went through over 1,000 years where the village was the model of humanity. And we, as a result of that, had a different way that we actually connected. And we had a sense of place as well as a sense of community. Then came along only a couple of hundred years ago, the industrial society, where we said, look, we've now got new technology like electricity, like factories, which means we don't need to be in the farms. We can be in the cities. In fact, it's better to be in a city that has a port, whether it is a seaport or whether it is an airport, which allows us to connect with other cities around the world. And we started to think globally, but still with the city as being the base. And when that happened, industrial society took off. And that then went all the way to the last 30 years when we moved to 4.0, the information society. And that's when we said, you know what? We don't actually even need to be in the city. We just need to be connected to the internet and connected to each other. And we can actually build global communities. And we've seen that accelerate to the level that anyone who didn't get that, the ones who are still commuting for an hour each way to actually have a job in an office, with the pandemic, they've realized, actually, we don't even need that. We can all be online. But that isn't the realization in terms of the beginning of 4.0. It's the end of 4.0. It's when people go, yeah, we can do that, but it's actually not very fulfilling if we're not actually seeing each other. We're just connecting on Zoom. And that's why 5.0 is now taking off like crazy this year. So everything we hear about the metaverse, everything we hear about new economies is about 5.0. It's about the fact that we actually have got a digital layer which allows us to physically connect with each other. And we're just seeing the very, very beginning of it, as I'm going to share with you. And I'm going to share with you what's about to come. And if you're not positioning yourself right for this, then you're missing the easiest times it is to get into it, which is right now, when you've got less than 0.001% of the world that are actually part of this right now. So 5.0 is not the information society, it's the imagination society. You're only limited by your own imagination in terms of what's possible. So this is already something which was a really important part of our world leaders getting together, talking about Society 5.0, talking about how it links to the United Nations development goals. And with these different goals that we actually had set, it also went through how all the challenges that we had in 4.0, let's say, for example, like all the challenges you're seeing in terms of conflict, which comes from separation. It's about how 5.0 is about unity, where we all are kind of tired of that. And this is really important because if you're trying to fix the old, you won't move to the new. So instead of us being worried about being separated by our differences, we should be thinking about how we're united by our uniqueness, that we are different, but it's because we're unique from each other that unites us more by having teams which are diverse rather than basically kind of like trying to put up wars between ourselves. And we're seeing this in terms of the difference of the wealth gap compared to linked to the wealth effect. We're seeing this in all different aspects where we ourselves are not waiting for the governments, which clearly have lost their way together with the media, but that we're actually moving to a whole new world. A story that I used to give the very first time that we ran the Fast Forward, I gave the story of what happened 100 years ago at the beginning of the turn of the century when they had their first city conference. And they said the biggest issue they had was horse manure, right? At that point, they had this thing which was called the manure crisis, where they said that because of the number of people coming into cities at that time, which was the issue that the Industrial Revolution was creating, at that point, Times of London had calculated that the number of horses that would be required to actually look after everyone in the city would mean that would all be under 10 feet of manure, right? Because there wasn't the actual kind of like, cleaning systems for all of that horse poo. Well, guess what? At that exact same time, there were companies out there that were starting to actually build cars. And within 10 years, the problem was gone because the horses weren't on the streets anymore. The same thing is happening now when we talk about the crisis of the governments printing money, the crisis of the conflicts that are happening in the world, the crisis of what's happening in terms of how we all want to be more successful, but there's this wealth gap that's taking place, that we're actually getting restrictions by governments. That's all going to go within 10 years because we're not going to be having those same systems around in 10 years' time, unbelievably. But in the same way, back then, it would have been unbelievable to think we wouldn't have horses because we'd had them for 1,000 years. And then suddenly it all changed. All of us can actually be a part of it by thinking of this effectively like a new renaissance, that it comes down to 5 elements that all link together. And those elements, first of all, are the 3 that actually are about your upper body, is about how you are focusing at the world, where in 4.0, you actually had to choose between insight, impact, or income. If you chose insight, where you said, look, I want to live a life on my terms, where I get the freedom of what I want to do, then you probably would have been something like a digital nomad. This is very much like what I was doing. It's what Jason, has met a lot of people in Bali that are like this. They're like, I want to have my freedom. But the challenge at that point was for a lot of people being digital nomads, they said, yeah, I've got my freedom, but I can't really have as much income as if I was in a place like Silicon Valley where I had a tech startup where I could be worth billions of dollars, because there aren't a lot of digital nomads that are worth $1 billion because you need to be in one place where the money is. So you got to give up other things to actually be where the money is. And similarly, if you really want to have the impact and like make a difference in the world, then it probably isn't going to be chilling out on a beach. It's probably going to be in India or Africa or somewhere where you're going to have to give up some of those creature comforts, right? And that's what a social entrepreneur is called. So we were all choosing between, are we really an entrepreneur like a digital nomad, or with insight, or like, social entrepreneur with impact, or like a tech startup with income? What's happened today is that we're seeing companies that do all 3. I count myself as one. I have friends on YouTube that do this, where they're making millions on YouTube and they can travel around the world, but they're making a difference in what they do as well. And it's because there are now leverage mechanisms that didn't exist 10 years ago that we can now use to ensure we do all of these things. A lot of the people in the cryptocurrency space, for example, Vitalik Buterin, who is the founder of Ethereum, he spent the entire COVID pandemic in Singapore, where he was able to actually grow Ethereum into what is now a multiple billion-dollar ecosystem. And he's doing it just chilling out in Singapore, right? So you can be wherever we want to be while also being able to actually have the income and impact. And the way we do it is, as we can see down here, through high tech and high touch. It's no longer about whether you're an online business or an offline business. Even the likes of Amazon is buying into offline programs. Tesla is as much offline as it is online, where we're enhancing the world that we live in instead of making the online world a distraction. A lot of people misunderstand what metaverse is because they think it's us distracting ourselves even more with like VR goggles on, instead of what I'm actually going to show you is the real power of using this as a digital layer, which is a really key part of this as well. And all of this links to this one concept, which I will come back to every single time to begin and end my 10 steps, which is Buckminster Fuller's concept of the final exam. And the final exam, I'm going to say it again, because those of you who know me know that this is the driver that got me into being an entrepreneur over like 30 years ago. And it was when I was at architecture school in Cambridge and I heard about Buckminster Fuller for the first time. I've been super lucky since then to meet all the people in the Bucky Institute, to be around the people that were his understudies. And then here, even though I never met him personally because I was too young at the time, to hear those who actually were around him share all of their knowledge about how he was. He was a true visionary. He was a futurist. And he said even back there in the 70s, that he said we had enough technology to solve all the world's problems. The way he was so smart at just making things simple. And he said that all of the world's greatest challenges are simply distribution challenges. He said, poverty is not because we don't have enough money. We got more than enough money. It's just not distributed effectively. So some people have all of it and other people have none of it. Education isn't because we don't have enough teachers or we don't have enough knowledge. We just haven't distributed the education in a way that everyone can actually access it. And he said, same thing with food, for example, like hunger isn't because we don't have enough food. We've got food mountains in the world today, but that doesn't stop the fact that it doesn't distribute to all the right people in the right way. He says the one key thing that technology is best at is distribution. And he said, we already have enough technology that already allows us to access all of the world's challenges and solve them all. And the only reason we haven't isn't because of technology, it's because of our human consciousness. It's about the fact that we haven't actually got our consciousness to a level where we're actually thinking in the right way to solve these problems, largely because most governments are thinking just about their own thing and then fighting other governments, or we ourselves in our companies are just thinking about our own thing and not collaborating with others in a way that we could. And he says that we are now in the final exam. And the final exam is one in which technology continues to accelerate, as we're seeing, and we have to be accelerating our human consciousness to catch up with that technology to be able to harness it. The final exam is a final exam because if we pass, we'll solve all the world's problems, right? And I see parts of the world, and you're going to hear with these 10 waves, we have more tools now than ever to do this. And there's more people using those tools now than ever to do this. But there's also the possibility that we'll fail the exam. And failing the exam is what happens when technology continues to accelerate beyond our ability to catch up, and eventually it will destroy us. We've seen people like Elon Musk, we've seen people like Stephen Hawking already warn about AI, about the fact that if we don't control this technology as it's growing, it will destroy us. And we are at that point where this really truly is final, in that if we actually get destroyed, of course, we're not even around to be able to correct ourselves after that. And I remember when I first heard that, I was so shocked about the fact, is this going to happen in my lifetime? And then I took this as a responsibility myself to say, well, I'm not going to be sitting around, after Armageddon with my great-great-great-grandchildren, if they happen to survive, looking back and like saying, well, my great-great-great-grandfather was around at that time. Why didn't he do something about it? And that's why I, in fact, focused no longer at building buildings, but started to build communities, build companies where it was all about human consciousness rather than the technology. And that's what this is about right now as well. How can you lift your consciousness to the level which enables you to also harness what I'm about to share? Because at every level, we're going to be talking about superhumans as much as superhuman AI. So this is about your ikigai. Are you doing what you love? Are you doing what the world needs? Are you doing what you can get paid for? And are you doing what you're good at, right? This is the most fundamental part. I'm going to come back to this in a moment, right? But do know that we do have our passion test, which is all about what you love. We do have our purpose test linked to the United Nations Global Goals, which is to do with what the world needs. We do have the wealth dynamic system, which is to do with what you're good at. And we also have got the levels of the lighthouse, which is what you can be paid for. So if you're new to our community, know that these are all free tools that allow you to have assessments on Genius U that you can go ahead and take. So don't worry if you don't know all the details right now. Just know that our whole focus is not about you just surfing a wave. It's about you having a surfboard that can surf every wave. And your surfboard is your ikigai. The stronger and harder it is, the more clear you are about it, and the more solid it is, the more you can surf any wave. But if you aren't clear about these areas, this is where you need to start, right? Just like with the Renaissance, it starts with self-awareness. And from self-awareness, you can then get self-mastery and then fully self-expression, which is really what your business is all about. Two people that everyone will know if you watch Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary and Laurie Greener, they're the opposite of each other, right? Laurie will look at things and say, well, how can I promote that as a star? Kevin will look at it and say, how can I create cash flow out of that as an accumulator, right? And then you've got like two people who are the wealthiest in the world, Mukesh Ambani, richest man in India, Yang Huiyan, richest woman in China, and they make their money in totally opposite ways. One through leadership, where it's all about the people, one through property, where it's all about the cash flow. And then two people also who made their money in totally different ways that 10 years ago were really having no money at all. Susan Wojcicki, who basically is the head of YouTube, doing deals with all the stars, compared to Vitalik Buterin. So I'm just going to share that like we are always upgrading the things that we're doing as we go as well. And with that, let me just ask you all to score your Ikigai. And here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to get a piece of paper or just do it on like, your mobile phone or calculator, whatever you like, and just answer these 4 questions. And we're going to add up the number. The first question is, if you were to score on a 0 to 10 scale, the level to which you are currently living your passions, which means every day you're doing the things that you love to do, whether it's in your job or in your life, so that at the end of the day, you're more energized than the beginning of the day. That's the definition of passion, is that each hour you're doing it, you're in more energy, as opposed to things that you aren't passionate about, where each hour you do it, it depletes your energy, right? So to what extent are you actually doing what you love? 0 to 10 scale, right? Just give yourself a score, right? Like if it's low, give it 2 or 3. If it's high, give it 8 or 9. Okay, secondly, right, you're going to give a second number. Second number is, what extent are you actually doing what the world needs, what your mission is, right? What your purpose is. You know when you're doing the things that are your purpose because they pull you instead of passion, which pushes you. So to what extent are you saying, I'm doing what's most meaningful in my life? That's what's going to keep you persevering in tough times, even more than the passion. And on a 0 to 10 scale, to what extent, whatever it is that you think, and I feel that I have no idea what my purpose is, or I kind of know it, but I'm not doing anything about it right now, then you're going to score low. If you go, I am so on purpose, right? Like I'm doing all the right things, even if you're not passionate about all the things because you haven't organized your team in the right way. So you're doing some things you're not passionate about, but you go, but I'm definitely on purpose, right? What's your score again, 0 to 10? Come up with a different score. Check out those 2 scores and see which one is the higher one of those 2 right now. Third question is, if you take another score, which was what you're good at, which is your talents. You know when you're living your talents because things get attracted to you. Just like if you're in a game of football and you're in the zone, everyone's kicking you the ball, right? So it's like, wow, the moment you're actually in flow, doing what you love to do, everyone goes, hey, can you help me out? Or what about this opportunity? The less you're doing your things that you're talented at, or the things that aren't the things that you are best at, that's when you are out of talent. Now, a lot of us, we do admin work, we do our emails. They're frankly not things we really should be doing. And all the most successful people I know almost don't do any emails at all anymore, because that's not where their time is best used, right? So what is your talent, and to what extent are you actually every day saying no to the things you shouldn't be doing and automating or outsourcing them, and saying yes to the things that you should be doing because they really are your talents and they make your flow like allow you to attract the people around you, right? That all the best talent gets attracted to the best talent. So on that third one, what are you good at? 0 to 10 scale. How much are you living that today? And then the final one is what you can be paid for. Are you actually getting paid your worth right now? Should you be getting paid more based on what you're seeing other people getting paid? And if you're your own boss, you're probably not paying yourself enough. So ask yourself that question, like on a 0 to 10 scale, to what extent am I actually getting paid my worth right now? And put yourself down a score in a 0 to 10 on that as well. Okay, you've got 4 numbers now. Add all 4 numbers together. And when you have all 4 numbers together, post them in the chat. And we'd love to see just what your current score is. Don't worry about having a low score. I mean, that just means you've got room for improvement. But basically see where you're at right now and just kind of get a sense. Do you think that you've improved this year, or has it gone down? Has it gone the other way? And ask yourself, well, what do I want it to be a year from now? And the most important thing that I can be asking of each of you right now is, regardless of what knowledge I give you, the most important thing is direction, which isn't all the knowledge, because you can take all the knowledge and do nothing with it. But the direction is what action you take out of it. And if you were to say, okay, I really hope that I find a way to take my passion from 6 to 8, for example, or I find a way to take my purpose from like 3 to 7, or I find a way to actually change what I'm getting paid for from 5 to 7. Don't try and do all of them, but just pick one that's going to be one you're going to focus at. And believe me, that focus is going to allow you to actually have actionable steps that come out of everything that I share. So I'm going to come over to Jason for a moment. And Jason, let's just talk for a few minutes about either just your your reaction to what I was sharing, and maybe even what you see your Ikigai as right now. And then if there are some questions that you think are questions worth us covering right now that will help everyone listening, let's do that as well.
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you so much for the presentation. So fantastic. And what I love about the way you share it too is that you talked about how there's like corruption in government and in the media, and it seems like everything we hear, it's negative, it's doomsday, it's fear-based, and it kind of blocks your even your perception of identifying opportunities in the midst of the chaos, right? And so when I listen to a presentation like this, it's like, hey, wait a second, there's something else happening besides what the majority are talking. And we kind of hear it, but we forget to kind of put that opportunistic, or at least that opportunity mindset. And this is what I love the most about this presentation. I have to say, I did the Ikigai test, and I already put it in the chat. So everybody else, make sure you're adding it to the chat, because I'm taking the time to do the exercise too. I feel overly optimistic, Roger, but I did rate myself a 36. But it's like, I feel like I'm on the right pathway. There's definitely some areas, like on the income side, of course, I want to make more, but I feel like I'm putting together the right steps to be on that right pathway. And knowing that I have guides like you around, it just like, it makes me realize that, hey, I think I'm seizing these opportunities the right way because I'm being informed, I'm being put up to date with what's happening. And I think that's a big testament to being a learner.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, let me share something about your 36 score, right? At the same time as some of the scores of those that are actually sharing at the moment here. I'm just going to do a quick refresh here as well, but you can see, we've got Martina here. She's got 23 in total. We've got Yvette, which is at 28. She's saying moving in the right direction. Big change from her last Ikigai. We've got James, 21. We've got Simonia at 16. Yikes. Definitely helps me as a start, give me a way of focus. So different people like 14. Here's one thing I will share. If you're anywhere between 0 and 20, it means that you're less than half where you need to be at 40, right? Like, if you were in a test at school, right, then you'd be failing the test, right? You're under 50%. But there's a key part to this, which is that if you're in a job, then 100% we know that, like, it's about 80% of people aren't happy with their job. So you'd expect them to be under 50. But if you're running your own business, which means you get to decide what you're doing, and you're under 50%, that's a wake-up call. That's like, whoa, maybe I'm actually doing the wrong thing. Maybe I should be working with different people in different ways who are in a high level, because if I can't figure out a way for myself to be over the 20, then something somewhere is wrong with my vehicle in what I'm doing. Just keep that in mind, because it's not you. It's not the fact you're just doing something like, okay, I don't enjoy cycling anymore. Well, take a car, right? It's like, just change vehicle. Now, easier said than done, because it means you've got to decide what vehicle to change. But by knowing that, it's like, just don't settle for being under 50%. But I'll say the opposite. You see, Esmeralda here is at 32. You said that you're at 36. Jason, what I would say is, if you're over 30, like Miguel's just on 30 here, if you're over 30, think of your Ikigai like a flower pot, right? And if you're a flower pot and the flower is getting to a size where it's filling up the pot, right? And it's like, oh, I'm almost totally full. This is a clue that now's the time to increase the size of the pot, right? So it's actually possible to go from 36 down to 30 or 28 by just saying, wait, hang on, I'm at 9 out of 10 on purpose. Well, what could be a bigger purpose, right? Or I'm at like 9 out of 10 on talent. What could be, I'm at like 10 out of 10 on my earnings. Wait, hang on. What would make it a 5 out of 10 on my earnings? What actually could I be actually focusing at and expanding your thoughts to the next level? Does that make sense, Jason? Oh, you're on mute there, by the way.
The mute button sometimes is tricky. I was going to say, what actually made me go a little like, is when you showed that slide talking about the impact, the income, as well as the, I forget the last one. It was the
income, impact, income, and insight. So
Insight was the one that, like, when I looked at this and realized that you don't need to choose, because I always felt restricted. I was like, oh yeah, if you decide to not care, then you can go make money. And this is really shifting. So I 100% agree with your assessment. Is like, I'm almost feeling like I'm quite big in a small pond, which makes me realize that, hey, maybe I should be looking at a river now, or I should be moving to a bigger sea, or going to a bay and going to the ocean. And I know we talk a lot about impact and impact meters, and I know that's a big tool that I've looked at from your learnings that really helped me understand that, hey, there's a bigger way that I can do what I do. But like I said, it was like an optimistic score, but it also challenges me to push the envelope.
Exactly. And one thing I would say, this is for Jason, but it's for everyone else listening as well. If you're wondering what's the order I should go in, I mean, usually whatever's your lowest should be the one that you actually focus at, because it's like having a wheel where one piece is basically kind of like blocked, and that's why it's bumpy. It's a bumpy road, right? So kind of like open up the wheel first of all. But then there is actually an order which actually makes life much easier. So for example, with the Renaissance man, always start with insight. I know this happened to you, Jason, when you're like, doing your property investing in Canada, you're making lots of money. Making the choice to move out to Malaysia and do something which is more meaningful will mean that it could be that you drop your income for some time, but it's the right thing to do because you've now opened up your flower pot. Going out to Bali is the same thing. It's like, hey, I know more about what I want and what I don't want. And so again, you're taking that next step. So be okay. I'm saying this to everyone, be okay giving up on some of the income short term to actually get into something more meaningful, because you attract more of the best people And you also open yourself up to the things where it's all much more fun. So it doesn't even feel like hard work. Very big difference between hard work and working hard. Right? You can work hard and it doesn't even feel like work because you're doing what you love, but hard work actually is going against the current, and it's what none of us should be doing. So first thing, number one, really important, is insight, right? Is about, okay, am I really clear who I am, what I should be doing? Then you can move not to income, but impact, right? It has to be impact next. I mean, obviously make enough money to get by, but impact is about doing what's most meaningful. And then you then get onto income, right? And in terms of high touch, high tech, much easier to always make money high touch before you get to high tech. When someone's like, how do I start an online business that makes $10,000? I'll say, wait, no, start with who can you speak to that way you can make your $10,000, because it's about fundamentally starting with the fact that we're humans, we're not machines. And then you can then actually bring the automation side in afterwards, right? So always know that. Ikigai, same thing. Always the first thing to start with is passion, because passion is what drives you. No point looking for purpose if you can't even get out of bed in the morning. But if you have something that you're passionate about, then once you get your passions up, it's like, wow, now I'm doing what I actually love, and it doesn't feel like hard work. Your brain starts tapping into its unconscious in a way it doesn't if your passion's off, right? And then from that passion, you get the energy, which then leads on to purpose as the second thing. And then from purpose, it then leads on to your talents. And then from talents, it then, because you're going to be using your talents with whatever's most meaningful. Use your talents in places which isn't meaningful. You're going to be in the wrong place doing something well, but not doing it in a well that actually fulfills you, right? And then the income will always come as the final part of that. But it's about faith in this process to make that happen. So thank you, Jason. I'm going to come back to you, but I'm going to continue on with the next of our waves here because we are going at pace, right? So whatever's biggest learning so far, that like be really great to see everyone being so interactive. So do just post down whatever's biggest learning that's already come out for you from this first wave. And then let's jump right into the next wave.